Welcome to Thunder Nerds. I'm Brian Hinton.
I'm Janelle Pizarro.
And I'm Frederick Philip Von Weiss. And thank you for consuming the Thunder Nerds, a conversation with the people behind the technology
that love what they do.
And do tech good.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. We are live at DevFest, Florida 2019.
In Orlando, Florida at the Magical Contemporary Resort.
Wow. And
Magical.
we are with a magical person today. We are with Michele Cynowicz.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Michele. Yeah. If you don't mind, if we could just jump right in, do you want to tell our audience a little bit about you and what you do?
Sure. I'm a front-end engineer with Vox Media. Not to be totally confused with Vox.com. We do run Vox.com, but we also run the SB Nation World of Sports blogs. We also run TheVerge.com. We run Recode.net, Polygon.com.
Wow.
The McElroy family recently joined us. So the my brother, and me group of podcasters have also joined our platform. So we do, we have many networks that use our platform for digital publishing.
Nice. Yeah, I love the Vox, the YouTube channel. I love the Vox borders and all the amazing content. And The Verge, of course, great content on The Verge.
Yes.
Big fan.
Anyone who's into the new hotness in hardware is all about is all about The Verge.
Yeah.
If you're not here and you don't know what new hotness is, you better get here. Just saying.
Speaking of the new hotness, what kind of things have you been taking part of today? Have you been watching some of the speakers?
I was fashionably late to this event, so I missed quite a few of the talks, but I got to see one talk that I really enjoyed. Stacy Devin, animations with Android, I think.
Oh, cool.
Ooh.
That must have been interesting.
I'm a big fan of animation, but that's how I ended up in front-end engineering. Not that I get to animate much, and I don't work in mobile, but I do enjoy front-end engineering.
Ooh.
What kind of stuff do you do then in your day-to-day?
So for my day-to-day work, I work in the engineering group for Vox product. So one of their networks, so there's a journalism side, but I'm on the product side where we build the tools for their publishing.
Cool.
And the tool that I work on is a video content management system. So
VMS, sweet.
something like that, yeah. So what happens is we allow video producers and journalists to upload video content to a system that can then pair that video content with different versions of itself. So if we want to publish something to Facebook that's in a different format, then they want to send to YouTube that's in a different format, then they want to send out on Apple News. They have a space where they can say, this is the project. These are all the different versions of the video. These are the caption files. This is the thumbnail that we want for this format, the thumbnail we want for that format. This is the metadata that we have. These are the people who worked on the project. And they can change the titles for YouTube, Facebook, Apple News to fit whatever the limit is for the description or the limit for the title. And then from that one place, they can publish those videos to those platforms.
Wow.
And
Cool.
And that also transcodes for HLS and things like that. So it is a one-stop shop for managing videos for output for our journalists and our journalism groups.
Is that part of a broader system that you guys have, where a content management system is a part of it?
It is attached. It is
Okay.
attached. So let's say so we also have an editor,
Yeah.
which is a separate application, but the editor hooks up to the video management. So if, let's say, a journalist is writing something and they have an associated video that they want to add to their article, they have the ability within the editor to search the integration and then say, that's the video I want, that's the version that I want, that's the metadata that I want, and they can just plug that into their article and it will publish with
all of that is all custom built by you guys?
Yes.
Oh, that's
Dope.
impressive. Yeah, that's awesome.
Love it.
Where are you guys located?
Well, Vox Media is officially headquartered in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
But their largest office is in New York City, and the New York City office is where they do most of the video production work. So they actually have a video studio in the office in New York City. But the engineering group is largely remote. And the team that I work on, almost everybody works from a different location. So I actually work from my home in the Tampa Bay area of Florida.
Oh, hey,
That's awesome.
St. Pete.
Wow. Awesome.
Very,
Nice.
very cool. So, are you speaking later on today?
I am. I'm speaking in about 2 hours.
Cool. And what is your talk going to be about?
My talk is called Shifting to Vue. I probably should have been more specific because that's VueJS, the framework,
Yeah.
the JavaScript framework. So we took on a project to revamp the front end of our video management system, which is originally built with Rails. And we said, okay, we want to apply, a reactive front end because we have so many different functions in this application now because it has scaled. It was a baby app a couple of years ago, and it's grown way too big for what we built it for. And it does a lot of functions. And in a Rails app, which starts out as a CRUD application, create, read, update, delete, there's a lot of page refreshes and new URLs. And if you go to one place and you start a video upload, you may have to wait a little while depending on the length of your video.
Yeah.
And then you cannot leave that page, that URL, to go somewhere else. And this was like a pain point for a lot of our users because
Sure.
if you have a
Yeah, makes
45-minute video and not the fastest connection, you may wait 45 minutes for your video to upload and you cannot close that browser tab.
Yeah.
So we really wanted to put a reactive front end where everything was kind of a single page app. So you could kick off an upload, but in the same space, you could also fill in your metadata and upload more than one video and explore other projects while things are going on. So Rails is not your most framework friendly because it is kind of its own framework. So there was a big undertaking to add a VueJS front end to this old Rails app. But we have hundreds of daily users. We have lots of third-party integrations. We have jobs that run all day, like cron jobs that just do things to connect and authenticate for all of our different third-party applications. So we can't just tear this thing down and build a new one, right? We have to build it out and kind of then the question was, well, build it all out at once and then just switch everybody over. If we build it all out at once, it's going to take us a long time because it's a big application. There's a lot going on. So we said, what if we build it all at once over here, but we also build it in piecemeal over here and roll out components to the users who are currently active and kind of get them used to a new flow as they go, right? So we don't just shock them with a whole new user interface.
Yeah, you get to debug it a little bit more carefully as well.
And then there was the question of, well, can we do that kind of a thing with a reactive framework? And so I have proved that we can. And I try to do high level in the talk about how you can do that type of a thing where you can build components that can exist in a single page application, but also in a Rails application. So lots of compare and contrast. And these are steps to take to get it started.
Yeah, that's why I was super excited about your talk. It's one that I wish I could go see, but obviously we're going to be here because I love VueJS. I love it. It's so awesome. Because of the fact that you're mentioning what you're talking about is it's very portable that you can just change a component and not worry about it's connected to other components like React and everything else does not work that way. It's not as portable as VueJS is, and it's really impressive.
Not to favor React.js over Vue.js. I like them both. But I will say this. I think that what I've done in this talk with Vue.js could be done with React.js if someone sat down and tried to figure out how to do it. There is really no textbook for what we did with Rails and Vue.js.
Right.
And that's why I'm giving this talk, because when we first approached this, we didn't even know if it could be done. And we had to kind of figure it out. And, you know, lots of documentation digging, and, you know, on VueJS has some great docs. I think that's one of the things that makes it really approachable to a newcomer. So shout out to Chris Fritz, who writes those docs. But the part where you get into the Rails app, that's not very clear. Rails isn't out there advertising how to put a new framework in their own framework. Like, it's not a thing that they're putting out there. I think I found like one tutorial video that explained how to, you know, create a VueJS component inside of a Rails app. And then I took it from there and I was like, all right, this is how we might be able to do it. Let's see if it works. And it did work, and it worked really well. And we are in the process now of rolling our users over from our legacy application to our beta.
Cool. So a question that I have, it's pretty, I guess, common to do something similar to this, almost like, you know, hey, you know, our app grew real big and now we got to pivot in some way. How does this scale? With, you know, I guess my question here is more, picking Vue over any other framework, you know, is a real framework already there, as opposed to, like, you know, maybe Ember or, you know, React?
So we actually asked this question about 2 years ago. We asked this question, and it was interesting because the people who've been working at Vox, like myself, haven't worked with any of those frameworks because we've just been working with Rails. And so when my manager posits to me, well, what framework do you think we should use? I say, I would have to learn them and compare them. So that became the project. I learned React. Shout out to Wes Boss, React for Beginners program. I learned React. And then I built a prototype of our new interface, really low level, lo-fi basic thing, just to see how it would look if we built it with React. And then I took that prototype and I put it on the side, and then I learned VueJS. And then I built a VueJS prototype. And then we started to looking into Ember. And the funny thing about Ember is that Ember didn't seem at the time to have had any real activity on it. And one of the fears with using any of these frameworks is that they are React is open source now. At the time when I was doing the research, there was a little hiccup about Facebook ownership of the React.js framework. That's been taken care of since, but the problem with any of these open source frameworks is the core team has to continue to iterate on it. People have to continue to come together and work on it as a team, right? And that's all voluntary. So if people suddenly say, hey, you know what? I'm done with that. I'm not working on that anymore.
Something shiny over there is more
You will end up with an abandonware. And nobody wants to build their entire work on something that's going to be abandoned by the time it's finished. So the real question was, how do we future-proof our app? And the answer is, there is no fucking way that you can future-proof your app. But doing our due diligence in researching and investigating, like, who's on the core team and how long has this been going on, and you know, is there a roadmap for this framework and things? And we found Ember.js didn't really have a lot of action post 2016. Like, some of those documents are really old. And when you start to dig into tutorials and blog posts, you find that people who were using Ember.js are now using Glimmer, which is like, I guess, because I really didn't get that much farther. I was like, it's Ember.js, but now it's Glimmer, but now it's React. And it was so hard to look at and say, yes, this is something that I can say would be a viable candidate for this project, that we never even built the Ember.js prototype. So it's a React.js prototype and a Vue.js prototype. And React has a lot of resources. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of tutorials, there's a lot of information. Clearly, Facebook is the prime example of it as a project, and it works and it's scalable. But from the perspective of someone who is learning it for the first time and thinking about how that affects the rest of my company or my team or people who will then also need to learn that in order to join me in this project or in order to take on the other project. VueJS' learning curve was so much lower than React.js. And that was the biggest of the green lights for VueJS was that I can build this quickly. I don't need to memorize all the ins and outs of JSX. The syntax is clear because I've been an engineer, a front-end engineer for over 10 years, and I am completely accustomed to looking at an HTML block, a script block, and a style block.
Yeah.
And if you, and I believe it was Pine Wu, who spoke at VueConf US last year, who equated the beauty of a single JS component is that it looks exactly like a CodePen layout.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have your HTML and your scripts
CSS.
and your CSS, and it's all right there on the screen. And now with Vue.js and their single file components, it's all right there in one component. And it makes it easier to understand if you're coming to it from a place of someone who's been working with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for years.
So this choice was made towards the average developer, so that if you had people already on board, but also the people who were coming in could also make quick, easy decisions and kind of could build this app as fast as possible.
Yes, yes.
I like
Fast
that.
iteration was definitely a thing that we took into consideration for our final decisions.
And I imagine that structure too means that, hey, if Phil over here doesn't know much about the JavaScript and the HTML, but Phil's a CSS whiz, he can come in and be like, this is my safe area.
Right.
This is where I can go and I can make my changes. Don't touch the others. Okay, good job, Phil.
That's a good point. Like, did you
Yeah.
feel that kind of comfort within your team, being able to delegate those kind of things?
I would say that nobody who has come across the people who've been working on this with Vue.js have been a very tight-knit group. It's been myself and like 2 other people. And I was the only one who actually did take part in the research and the prototyping project. But the other people who came along and jumped on it, no problem. They were
That's great.
they were right in. And I didn't feel that way when I looked at React.js.
It's a testament to Vue.js. Again, why I love it. It's awesome.
Cool. So what is your favorite thing, do you think, about Vue now that you've been able to start doing this whole revamp and build such a huge kind of enterprise thing with it?
I think my favorite part of it is actually that internally in Vox Media, we have a design system that's built in web components.
Stop. That's amazing.
Yes, it is an amazing system. And shout out to Dan Chilton, who basically wrote it himself. And our amazing design team who put the design part of this together. But it is in web components, and part of the prototyping included proving that our design system would work within React.js and Vue.js. Whatever framework we were going to use had to also be friendly to web components. And again, syntax-wise and the lifecycle hooks in Vue.js, they all work swimmingly with our web component library, which wasn't built with Vue.js or React.js in mind, but we were able to just connect those like Legos, like they just fell together. We've hit it's been so smooth and amazing to see how quickly and easy we've been able to iterate and add things with Vue.js and our design system with web components.
Amazing.
And isn't that because they can, since it's native, just straight up HTML instead of JSX, you can just literally pull in the component, right?
Correct.
Stop. Literally, component libraries are like everything. They're everything.
I will say this. So I don't know if this is the most popular thing about the VueJS framework, but it is entirely possible to build VueJS components with JSX. When I first learned how to do VueJS, the tutorial that I went through was showing me how to create components with JSX, and they were very, very similar to a React.js component. So at that point, I was like, why do we even have two frameworks? They're like exactly the same. And then someone introduced me to the next tutorial or a different tutorial, which dealt with these single file components, which are basically the bread and butter of what we wanted in a framework, which was that syntax and that layout and that capability. But when Vue.js compiles, it compiles to JSX, and then it compiles again to what you output.
Nifty. Like, I love that as well, because that means that, even if you perchance hire new people and they're like, you know what, I only know React, you could be like,
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Let me tell you.
And I've heard that from people say, oh man, I heard Vox was hiring, but I saw that they use Vue.js and I only use React. And I say, you got this. React.js developers are fine to take on Vue.js because the concepts are so similar. Components are similar. The life cycles are a little bit different, but close enough that it's not a big shift. So, I would say it might be a harder shift to go from a Vue.js world to a React.js world, because if you've been using single file components, then you do have to get comfortable with JSX. But the other way, React to Vue, easy peasy.
Yeah.
Nice. And I kind of feel like React and Preact and Vue.js is all precursor to just going components and getting rid of all of it. Eventually, it's kind of like the jQuery of the age, where now JavaScript has kind of replaced the need for jQuery with all the updates. And it's a very interesting time. Where one thing that I want to know that I've been asking everyone since I remember to start asking is that, like, the time and effort. People don't realize that the amount of work goes into doing the presentation, gathering materials. I like to know a little bit about like what your process was, how what you did.
Well, when I first wrote the abstract for this presentation, I was under the impression that I would have an hour on the stage. When they accepted the talk and then told me that I only had 20 minutes, I was like, oh shit. I didn't think, and they were using the abstract to promote the talk, and I was like, I don't think I can cover that whole thing in 20 minutes. And I panicked and I froze, and I was just like, I'm just gonna work and just not think about that now. Also, I was working on this particular project, so I was hoping that my time working on the project would lead itself into screenshots and explanations and stuff. But Christmas happened, and I also am a mother, and I have children, and things got crazy for a little while, and our project launched, and it is way too expansive and complex for me to take screenshots of it and just put them up and let people read the code. Like, none of that will make sense. And luckily, they changed their stories that I had 30 minutes. I was like, yes, I get another 10 minutes. Maybe I could do it. But this was probably the most complicated and lengthy presentation I've ever put together, because I really had to rebuild a lot of the basic structure. And I had to take a lot of new screenshots and write a lot of pseudo pieces just for the sake of showing them in the presentation.
Simplify it down.
The other thing was, this is not a Vue.js convention. This is not a place where everybody walking into my talk is going to be familiar with Vue.js or familiar with Rails. So I have to put it at a high level, have an introduction, and kind of make clear what I'm doing, even though you might not be familiar with how this works. So I do take a few liberties in my talk about, like, I assume people are familiar with the ES6 flavor of JavaScript where we import things into JavaScript files, and we're not like using require or any of those older methods for compile. I'm assuming people have kind of a concept on what a build tool is and how what compiling is. I try to keep it high level. I will say I got the Vue Vixens organization, which I am a part.
Awesome, yeah.
And we did a little video conference, and I took her through my program at that point as far as I've been. And she said she is not familiar with Rails. She wanted to see more excitement in my presentation. And this goes back to my history from before I was an engineer, when I was a designer for a shoppers ad. Ever get those like Valpak or free ads?
Yeah.
And you open it up and like there's that whole ad, and then there's like a big burst, 50% off, and a big burst that says like new and improved or get this thing free. So she was trying to explain to me how I needed to make my talk more engaging, more and I needed to sum up my slides for people who might not be familiar. And I said, so you're telling me add more bursts. So if you do get to see my talk, because I know you all won't, but if you do get to see it on video, you will see that my entire presentation is peppered with summations that are in big yellow bursts.
I love
Nice.
it.
Awesome. Are your slides going to be online or?
They asked for people to send their slides. My slides are done in Keynote, which I've never sent to anybody. I also say that because I thrive on small animations. I have like hundreds of slides, even though it's going to be like it's going to be a half an hour presentation, I hope.
You can do it.
And I'm going to talk a little fast, click fast, right? But like every small animation has its own slide. So I'm like, I don't think I should send out 187 slides that have like a lot of duplication, you know? So it's like, maybe I'll make another version that has less animation and more just like click through, and then it'll be less slides, and I'll send that out.
Slides with festivities in them. Yes,
Yeah.
festivities that are toony.
I-
Yeah, because like they have bursts, right?
Yeah.
Festivities.
No, you got it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for all of your effort in making your presentation, for joining us here and talking with us.
Thanks for having
thank you
me.
so
This
much.
is cool.
Yeah.
My first podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, number one.
We're gonna shout her with stickers later.
Yeah, exclusive. All right, thanks everybody. Stay tuned for more.
Toodles.